Hi, and welcome back to HazMat Ops Training. My name's Joel. Today we're going to combine our This Week in HazMat episode with a little bit of a review. We're going to kind of roll back to some content that we've done before, and that's for our BLEVE chart for the 2020 Emergency Response Guidebook. The reason that we're doing this, our episodes for This Week in HazMat are always based on things that are going on around the country. So we had right here in North Carolina, just in the last couple of weeks, we had a situation where a propane tank in the back of a pickup truck, it wasn't secured, somehow began to leak and found an ignition source, fire ensued, and eventually that tank failed. I'll put the news article down in the description. You can read it for yourself. What we're going to do is look at some of the hazards that are involved with situations like this. We're not looking at fault. We're not trying to find and point any fingers at anybody, anything like that. We simply, as responders, we want to learn from situations like this. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, it's also called HazMat Ops Training. So be sure and check us out there. I've got a link to this incident, to the news article there as well. Thanks for joining us. We're going to watch the video real quick, and then we're going to get right into our BLEVE chart in the 2020 ERG. Thanks. So we'll look here on page 367 to start our BLEVE chart, and just remember page 365 and 366 are the lead up, or the kind of the prelude pages, the intro pages to the BLEVE chart. And I want you to remember and understand here that the numbers that you see in these columns are based on mathematical equations. They're approximate numbers. They're not intended to be used as absolute numbers. They're intended to give you good, solid information for you to then take and make good, informed decisions. So that said, let's look at our capacity. Now, one thing that we can't know in this particular situation, based on a 3-second clip, a 3-second video clip, we don't know what size that tank was. There's no way for us to know that. We don't have access to the reporting from that incident, but we can take some information there to learn from. So let's look at the different capacities that the chart uses, and it starts with the very first one is a 26.4 gallon or a 100 liter tank, and that's kind of what I would consider a light residential type tank. I've got a picture here. It's for an average size adult, it's going to be about chest high tank. It's much bigger. It's about 3 times the size of a grill tank, maybe even bigger than that, maybe 4 or 5 times the size of a grill tank. For those of you who do barbecuing and use gas grills, those are about 20-pound cylinders. So this 26.4 gallon is what the propane industry considers a 100 pound. And again, we've got the illustration here on the screen. So again, we have to really kind of approximate on what size that tank is in the pickup truck there. We can assume that it's at least a grill size tank, at least a 20 pounder, or it could be as big as like what we're seeing here. In the bed of a pickup truck, it's probably not going to be much bigger than this 26.4 gallon or a 100 pounder for the propane industry. So let's look at that 100 pounder. Let's just assume that this right here, this 26.4 gallon, is what's in the bed of that truck. Let's use that for our scenario. So again, we've got some other dimensions that we can look at for other situations. If we can see the tank, and in this situation we can't, you got to put a lot of fire out before you can even see the tank that you're dealing with here. It's in the bed of a pickup truck, most likely surrounded by other combustible materials. There's just, we all carry a lot of stuff in the bed of pickup trucks, so it's likely that we're not going to be able to see it, so we have to approximate. But if we can see it, a tank that we're talking about here, about 1 foot in diameter, and again about chest high, about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. for an average size adult. So again, it gives you an idea of what kind of size tank we're talking about here. Again, somewhere 90 to 100 pounds is what we're talking about here, and they're talking about a 26.4 is around 88 pounds. So again, we're really, really close there. So here's what we want to really look at and concentrate on is some of these distances up here. So the minimum time for failure for severe torch, in this particular tank, we're looking at 4 minutes. That's an important number there. If you think about when the driver discovered the fire, pulled over into the parking lot, got it off the road, pulled over, and whether the fire was before they pulled over off the road or whether the fire, it was leaking, and I think the news article says that the tank was leaking. They pulled over to try to secure it. Somehow it found an ignition source and began to burn. So when was the 911 call made? We don't know that. Again, that's not what this is about. Did they call too early, too late? That's not what this is about. This is about using the chart to make some good informed decisions. So again, we have that 4 minute failure time for severe torch. Would we consider this scenario severe torch? I would say absolutely this is severe torch. Again, you've probably got some ordinary combustibles in the bed of the truck. So 4 minutes from the time that the fire started, and again with some other combustibles there, we likely had that severe torch nearly immediately. It's very, very likely that was an immediate severe torch situation. So that 4 minutes is clicking right away. So by the time there's the problem and the intensity of the problem is realized, we make the 911 call. And anybody in the nation, in the United States, if you can get a fire truck out the door from the time the phone rings to getting the fire truck out the door, if you can get them out in under a minute, you're awesome. So again, now the clock is still ticking. Now we're at 3 minutes. So what's the response time? Again, generally speaking, if you can get anywhere in the territory, now if it's next door to the fire station, that's great. But generally speaking, a 5 to 6 minute response time is amazing. And in this situation, I don't believe the fire department was there. I don't believe they had arrived on the scene when this tank failed. So, and justifiably so, but based on the numbers that we're talking about here, we lose a minute on call intake. So once we get the truck out the door and a 4, 5, 6 minute response time, which is pretty darn good, we're past that point of failure. So again, depending on the situation, depending on that severe torch, is it reasonable to say, yeah, this tank should have failed before the fire department arrived? Yeah, I think so. But if we hadn't had that severe torch situation and it was a little bit less of a severity of impingement on that tank, could that tank have failed when our firefighters are walking up with the hand line? Yes, it could. And again, that's the whole reason we're doing this. Why are we talking about this chart? Why are we using this chart? Why is it in the ERG? That's the reason right there. Because we want to understand and we want to know as best we can and be able to predict as best we can when that failure is going to take place. So let's look at the approximate time to empty for engulfing fire. What does that mean? So again, look back on 366. What that's talking about is if that tank has a properly sized pressure relief device, then you can expect that tank to be able to release and relieve the contents even under an engulfing fire in 8 minutes with a properly sized pressure relief device. Well, here's the problem. With the severe torch over here, we get to failure before we can get the tank emptied. So again, is this a worthwhile column for us to have? Sure it is. If the fire is not so severe like it is in this other column, then the tank potentially could burn off, could be empty. We need to expect this tank to fail. We need to expect the tank to fail. That way we take the most precaution, we've got the most safety factor built in. We need to expect the tank to fail. So let's look at the fireball radius. Again, for that tank, again, 100 pounder or somewhere 90 to 100 pounds. Again, we could be talking about a smaller tank. We could be talking about a 20 gallon, or excuse me, a 20 pound grill size tank. Again, I would much rather use this minimum number here instead of starting to do math on the side of the road but beside the fire truck. I'm going to use these numbers here, even if I know for a fact that it's a smaller tank. I want to use these numbers because this is where my science is. This is where the research has been done, and it gives me an even bigger safety factor. So again, for this size of tank that we're talking about here, and potentially even a smaller tank, we're looking at a 33 feet fireball radius. That means that anything inside that 33 feet, that diameter, and it won't always be perfectly round. Again, this tank is in the bed of a pickup truck. That potentially could affect the fireball radius. You see in the video here, in what you can actually catch before the camera cuts away, a lot of it went up. So the bed of the truck protected some, not a whole lot, of course. So again, 33 feet for a fireball radius. Anything inside that 33 feet is pretty much fully engulfed once that failure has taken place. The emergency response distance here, again, remember all of these are approximate numbers, but basically what this is saying, even for fully protected, full turnout gear, SCBA, fully protected firefighters, 295 feet is what the recommended distance is, standoff distance for this particular situation. So we're talking about potentially need to use unmanned monitors. There's just a lot of things that come into play when we talk about that emergency response distance. And again, 295 feet, that's a good ways out. But again, there's a safety factor built in there. Remember, these are not absolute numbers, these are approximate numbers. Here's what I'm worried more about, again, because by the time I get there, and really that emergency response distance for the initial phase and until I size this up, I'm assuming that this tank's going to fail. So I don't want to be anywhere inside of that evacuation distance if I can. Now again, it's our job to do things and to get folks out and to protect exposures and things like that. But I really, if I can stay outside of that 500 feet minimum evacuation distance, that's really where I would like to be. Again, you have to take all those considerations into play. So again, our minimum evacuation distance, 505 feet. So that's for unprotected, civilian population. We want to have them at least 500 feet away. Remember, this tank is failing. It's a steel tank, so it's going to have projectiles. It's going to have pieces and parts flying off of it. The valve assembly is likely going to come out of it. There's going to be things flying everywhere. So we want to. That's the reason that we look at. All right, a 33-foot fireball radius, okay, but a 505-foot minimum evacuation distance. That's a big difference. Well, it's because of all the stuff that's going to be flying off of it. Also, remember what's around it in the bed of that pickup truck. We've got to take that into consideration as well, and that's why the preferred evacuation distance is almost within 3 feet of being double. Again, what's around that tank when it fails, not only what's the tank going to do, but what's it going to push if there's a lot of things around it, what other kind of projectiles and all kinds of different things is it going to push and bring with it, things that are likely going to be burning as they're flying through the air. So again, that minimum evacuation distance of 505 feet, as well as a preferred evacuation distance, if we can, we would prefer to have them at least 1,000 feet away. All right, and then you have a cooling water flow rate. Sounds pretty low, 26 US gallons per minute. Sounds pretty low. We want to apply some cooling water if we possibly can. That is going to it's going to cool the tank. It likely would put the fire out, but we're also going to cool the tank. We want to do that to minimize the potential for failure. But again, remember, even with applying cooling water, we may not cool it enough to keep it from failing, especially if we're not able to put the fire out, if we're not able to take that flame impingement away. Even if we are, this tank still could fail. this tank still could fail, even with applying cooling water. So don't lull yourself into a false sense of security. That tank could still fail, even after applying cooling water. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for being with us today, both for HazMat Ops training for the channel and also for This Week in HazMat. We'll see you next time.